What would you do if a woman blocked your driveway with her luxury car and refused to move because she claimed your home was lower class? You might try reasoning with her, but that's the thing about Karens. They don't do reason. They do threats, entitlement, and chaos. What started with a BMW blocking my driveway turned into a battle involving the HOA, the police, fake legal letters, and a neighborhood-wide spectacle that ended with Karen being exposed in front of everyone. Before I tell you exactly how I turned the tables and made her regret ever crossing my driveway. Make sure to subscribe to Sham Stories, where we reveal the wildest true neighbor dramas and the unbelievable power of standing your ground. Because what happened on my street? You won't believe it's real until you hear the whole story. It started on a sunny Friday afternoon when I came home from a quick run to the hardware store and found a gleaming white BMW X5 parked directly across the mouth of my driveway, completely blocking my access. My driveway isn't shared. It's not part of a cul-de-sac. It's my private driveway, clearly marked, with signs indicating no parking. The BMW wasn't just slightly over the line, it was completely across the entrance, as if someone had deliberately parked it there to stop me from entering. I honked lightly, thinking maybe it was someone lost, maybe even a delivery driver making a mistake. No movement. I honked again. Then out of nowhere, she appeared. Short blonde bob, oversized. Sunglasses, athletic wear that hadn't seen a gym in years, and a latte in hand. She came out of the house across the street that had just recently sold. I hadn't met the new neighbors yet, but I quickly realized she was one of them. She walked over slowly like she had all the time in the world, sipping from her cup, and said with a smile that made my stomach turn, "Oh, are you trying to get in?" I was polite at first. "Yeah, this is my house. Can you please move your car?" She laughed like I had just told a joke. "Well, I needed a spot to unload some boxers, and your driveway's so close. I'll just be a minute." Patience is a virtue, you know. I blinked, stunned. Her house had its own driveway, one she wasn't using. "Why not just use your own?" I asked. She scoffed and said, "Because your driveway is flatter and closer to the door." And honestly, it's not like you were using it at that moment. She turned and started walking back into her house. I couldn't believe it. I said more firmly, "I need to park now. I'm not going to sit in the street because you think my driveway's more convenient." She stopped halfway up her steps, turned slowly and said, "Listen, you people can't just expect everyone to bend to your rules. I'll move it when I'm ready." My brain stalled for a second on the phrase, "you people." Not sure what she meant. My age, my job, my house, who knows? But it was clear she saw me as beneath her. She walked inside. I called the non-emergency line for the local police department and reported the vehicle. While waiting for them to arrive, I parked down the street and walked up my lawn, seething. That was when I noticed something taped to my front door. Piece of paper that read in big letters, "Your grass is unkempt. Please maintain HOA standards." There was no signature, no letterhead, no official seal. My heart pounded. I'd mowed just 3 days ago. Everything was clean. It was clearly fake, and it didn't take a genius to know who left it. The officer who arrived about 20 minutes later looked at the BMW, shook his head, and knocked on her door. Karen came out all smiles until she saw me standing there. With my arms folded, then her tone shifted. "I was just unloading boxes," she snapped. "You'd think neighbors would be more understanding instead of tattling." The officer told her she had no right to block a private driveway and that she needed to move immediately or risk being towed. Karen huffed like she'd just been sentenced to prison, got into her car with exaggerated slowness, reversed just enough to clear my driveway, then parked again halfway on the street and halfway on the curb, still in front of my house. She smirked at me through her tinted window before walking back into her house. That evening, I tried to let it go. I really did. I was in the middle of renovating my garage, dealing with work deadlines, and didn't have the energy to engage in war. But the next morning, when I opened my curtains, I saw her BMW parked diagonally across her driveway and mine again. This time, I had photos. I called the city, not just the local police, and requested that a parking violation officer come out. They ticketed her. She lost her mind. From across the street, she screamed at me, "You're pathetic. You can't handle one minor inconvenience without calling the cops? What are you, 12? I didn't respond. I just took another picture. That same afternoon, I received a letter in my mailbox, no postage, just hand-delivered. Claimed to be from the HOA and accused me of creating hostile energy in the neighborhood and using city resources to target neighbors. The letter was filled with typos and lacked any real HOA identifiers. I called the actual HOA office. They confirmed they hadn't sent any letter. That's when I knew Karen was going rogue, pretending to be the HOA, harassing me and weaponizing her car like it was a tool of domination. I documented everything. I installed a front-facing camera, took daily photos of her parking violations, and even began recording audio when I stepped outside. The following week, Karen escalated again. She started yelling at my visitors. One of my friends, who came by to drop off tools, parked legally along the curb, and Karen came storming out, shouting, "You can't park there. That spot's for clean vehicles only," whatever that meant. She pulled out her phone and started recording him like she was gathering evidence for a crime. He just shook his head and walked inside, but I knew this was becoming unlivable. And then she did something even worse. One afternoon, I came home to find my trash bins knocked over and smeared with what looked like yogurt and used coffee grounds. My mailbox was stuffed with soggy newspapers. I checked my camera's blurry footage, but it showed a figure matching. Her build sneaking away at 5:12 a.m. in a tracksuit. I filed a police report. They couldn't prove it was her yet, but the report was on file. I handed them the fake HOA letters, the photos, everything. They told me to document every single interaction going forward. So I did. And then one day something happened that made everything shift. I caught her in the act, literally sneaking across the street with a roll of caution tape and attempting to string it across my driveway as some kind of fake construction zone. That's when I stepped outside, phone recording, and calmly said, "What are you doing, Karen?" She froze, the tape dangling from her hand, then turned and hissed, "Protecting the neighborhood from you." I uploaded the video online, tagging the local neighborhood watch Facebook page. And within hours, the post exploded. Within a few hours of posting the video of Karen stringing caution tape across my driveway, the post had more reactions and shares than anything I'd ever seen on the local neighborhood watch group. Some people were outraged, others were entertained, and many finally broke their silence, flooding the comments with similar stories. "This is the same woman who yelled at my daughter for riding her bike too fast past her house," one mother wrote. Another person said she threatened to report me to the HOA because I parked a pickup truck in front of my house during a move. One by one, neighbors came forward. Apparently, Karen had been stirring chaos in the neighborhood ever since. She moved in, but until now, no one had any proof, and most people were too intimidated or annoyed to document it.
Out.
But my video changed everything. People were emboldened by the footage and the clarity of her behavior. And for the first time, her carefully maintained image of being just a concerned citizen was starting to crack. That afternoon, a man named Rick, from 2 streets over, knocked on my door. He introduced himself and said, "I've been dealing with her for over a year. She once called animal control on me because my Labrador was off-leash in my fenced backyard. She left a fake citation taped to my fence. We thought we were the only ones." I invited him in, and we shared stories for over an hour. 8 of the conversation, we decided to start compiling evidence pictures, videos, notes, timestamps, and assemble it into a neighborhood case file. The goal wasn't revenge, but protection. Karen was operating like a mini tyrant, and unless we wanted her to escalate further, we needed a community record of her behavior. Meanwhile, she hadn't stopped. In fact, she'd doubled down. The day after the video went viral locally, Karen parked her BMW across the end of my driveway again. Only this time she put traffic cones on either side of her car and a handwritten sign on the windshield that said, "Active unloading zone, no towed parking, or complaints." I wasn't sure whether to laugh or scream. I called the city again, and this time, an enforcement officer showed up with a tow truck. Karen stormed out, red in the face, shrieking about how she was being harassed and targeted for being successful. The officer calmly informed her that no such unloading zone existed on a residential street, and the cones and sign were illegal. He threatened to sue him, sue the city, sue me, but ultimately, she was forced to move the car herself to avoid it being towed. She slammed the door so hard her mirror rattled, peeled out down the street, and nearly clipped a mailbox in her fury. 2 days later, a knock came at my door. This time it wasn't a neighbor, it was a process server. What Karen was suing me? According to the documents, she was claiming defamation, targeted harassment, emotional distress, and interference with her property rights. I nearly choked. My lawyer read through the complaint and told me, this isn't just weak, it's performative, but we'll respond accordingly. He advised a counterclaim for harassment and nuisance and to continue documenting everything, so I did. I upgraded my surveillance system to capture higher resolution footage, added rear-facing dash cams to both my vehicles, and started saving every incident with date and timestamps. Meanwhile, the fake HOA notices returned, only now they were printed with a fake letterhead. One letter claimed I'd violated HOA rules by operating a surveillance network without approval. Another claimed I had been reported for threatening a female resident. None of them were real. I emailed the actual HOA president and requested an official statement. He replied within hours. Those letters are not from us. We do not authorize or support any resident issuing warnings or representing the board. He even offered to present that statement in court if necessary. That email became part of my growing case file. But perhaps the most telling moment came one weekend when I invited a few friends over for a cookout in my backyard. We kept the music low, the conversation casual, and everything wrapped up by 9 p.m. the next morning. I received a noise complaint citation taped to my door. Not from the city again, from Karen. A new fake document, this time designed to look like an official city notice, complete with a seal she must have copied from online. She hadn't even spelled the city inspector's name correctly. It's straight to the police, who added it to their growing pile. A few days later, an officer dropped by to tell me privately that the department was taking a closer look at Karen. She had made over 30 calls to the non-emergency line in 2 months, all about me. And all of them were either exaggerated or provably false. I could see the exhaustion in the officer's face when he said, "She's abusing city resources. We're compiling a file now." That evening, a few of the neighbors, who had also experienced her behavior, joined me for an informal meeting. We compared photos, shared recordings, and even printed out a timeline of incidents. What we discovered was staggering. Karen had used different versions of the same tactics on at least 8 separate households. Complaints, fake letters, threats, and dramatic performances, always twisting the facts just enough to make herself seem like the victim. One neighbor had caught her throwing seed pods and dirt into their gutter and then calling the city to report their yard as hazardous and overgrown. Another shared a voicemail in which Karen screamed about someone stealing sunlight by planting a tree too tall near her property line. And now, with my situation gaining attention, it was as if her behavior had escalated to a final frenzy of control and revenge. Then came the tipping point. Karen blocked my driveway for a third time in 1 week, but this time, I didn't call the city. I waited, simply walked up calmly with my phone recording, asked her to move the BMW, and when she refused again and said, "Maybe you should move to a place where people can afford driveways," I nodded and returned to my porch. 30 minutes later, a private tow truck, one I had scheduled in advance, arrived and hooked the BMW. She exploded, ran outside screaming, grabbing her phone, yelling that I was stealing her property. Yeah, but I had proof. The city had issued a statement allowing immediate tow for repeated violations, and this tow truck was privately contracted. As the BMW lifted off the pavement, Karen went ballistic. She tried to block the tow with her body, demanded the driver stop, and even lunged at my camera. I didn't move. I didn't say a word. I just let the camera record everything as the BMW was hauled off the property. Later that day, she posted a rambling video to the neighborhood group, calling me a harasser, a criminal, and a danger to the community. But the tide had already turned. People saw through it. Comments flooded in, calling her out, reminding her of her history, sharing their own receipts. She deleted the post within an hour, but the screenshots lived on. For the first time, Karen wasn't in control of the narrative. she was losing. And when she realized that public sympathy wasn't swinging her way, she turned to more desperate tactics, something no one saw coming. By the time her BMW was towed for the third time, Karen had burned nearly every bridge in the neighborhood. And everyone who once smiled at her fake kindness was now keeping their distance. But instead of stepping back or rethinking her approach, she grew more erratic and hostile, like a cornered animal. The lawsuits hadn't gone her way. The HOA denied knowing her fake letters. And her posts in the local Facebook group kept getting reported and removed. But what none of us expected was just how far she'd go when stripped of control. 3 days after the last confrontation, I woke up to the sound of pounding on my door. It wasn't the police, it was the fire department. It's one of the firefighters. Shouted that there was a gas leak reported at my property, and that neighbors had smelled something near the front of my home. I jumped out of bed, confused and still in my t-shirt and shorts, and rushed outside. They swept the area and confirmed there was no leak. There had been no odor. One firefighter turned to me and said, "This isn't the first fake report we've had around here this month? Anyone got a grudge against you?" I didn't even have to say it. I just nodded. That same morning, my neighbor Rick sent me a message with a screenshot of a Facebook post from a burner account warning residents to watch out for unstable behavior from the man on the corner, and included a zoomed-in photo of me standing in my yard holding a rake. It wasn't threatening, but it painted me as dangerous and unpredictable, exactly the kind of subtle smear campaign Karen specialized in. I reported the post. It was removed. But it was clear she was ramping up again. And this time she'd taken a more underhanded route. Later that evening, I received a knock on the door from Child Protective Services. A complaint had been made alleging that I was creating unsafe conditions for minors on the street by operating dangerous surveillance equipment and intimidating local children. I don't even have kids. I barely talk to anyone's kids. The CPS worker was polite, professional, and apologetic once she understood it was another false report. She was also very clear. We're required to investigate every complaint. Someone's abusing the system, and it's not just with you. This wasn't petty anymore. This was serious. Karen was filing false government reports, first code violations, then police complaints. Now CPS, she was targeting me, and it wasn't just about parking anymore. It was about reputation, about pushing me out. But she underestimated how much I was documenting everything. Every report, every incident, every video clip and fake letter, everything was in a file that my lawyer had already backed up and stored in multiple places. And now, with public services being dragged into her schemes, I had enough to go beyond civil court. I contacted a detective with the sheriff's department and shared everything, including the most recent CPS report. He took it seriously. False. Reporting to government agencies is a crime, he said. You've built a strong case. We're going to escalate this. While they worked on collecting enough evidence for a formal charge, I kept calm, but I didn't stop moving. I reached out to my local city council representative, who happened to be aware of Karen due to previous noise and zoning complaints. I told him everything. He directed me to the city's legal liaison and encouraged me to file a community impact statement. Within days, Karen was officially under investigation. But in her mind, I was still the villain, and she wasn't done. Trying to punish me? That weekend, just before dawn, I was woken by screeching tires and a loud crash. I ran outside barefoot, and what I saw made my jaw drop. Karen's BMW was smashed into my mailbox and halfway into my lawn. The bumper was torn, the grille cracked, and one of the front tires was flat. She was behind the wheel, dazed, looking more like a ghost than a person. I called 911 immediately. She got out slowly, stumbled a bit, and slurred. It was an accident. I tried to swerve around a dog. There were no dogs. There were no skid marks indicating a swerve. But there was a half-empty bottle of wine rolling around on the passenger seat and the unmistakable odor of alcohol on her breath. When the officers arrived, they conducted a sobriety test. She failed. She was arrested on the spot for DUI and reckless endangerment. As they cuffed her, she shouted toward my porch, "You did this. You set me up. but I just stood there in silence. The police weren't interested in her accusations anymore. The community wasn't either. Word of her arrest spread fast. The Facebook group that once saw her as a quirky, nosy neighbor now filled with jokes, memes, and stories from people who had been afraid to speak up until now. It was like a floodgate had opened. People shared clips of her yelling at delivery drivers, slapping flyers on people's windows, and ranting in public meetings. Even former friends began sharing screenshots of her bizarre text messages, passive-aggressive complaints, and wild conspiracies about the HOA being infiltrated by rule breakers and outsiders. Meanwhile, the city took action. She was fined. For reckless damage to property, my mailbox and cited for multiple previous false complaints. The sheriff's department confirmed that charges were being prepared for filing fraudulent reports and impersonating a city official in her fake HOA notices. The real kicker came when the HOA board themselves served her with a formal complaint for behavior unbecoming of a resident and issued a vote to have her expelled from the community association. She appealed, but the evidence against her was overwhelming. At the emergency meeting, the board played a compilation video that Rick and I had assembled. Every fake citation, every driveway block, every insult and incident laid out in clear chronological order. There was dead silence in the room as neighbors watched her unravel on screen. When it ended, Karen stood up and said in a shaky voice, "You've all been poisoned. He turned you against me." No one responded. The vote passed unanimously. She was done. Her power, her image, her reign over the neighborhood, all gone in one night. A few days later, her house went up for sale. She didn't stay for the open houses. She moved out silently in the middle of the night. No goodbye, no final message, just gone. But the damage she caused left a mark. Even after she left, it took time to feel normal again. I replaced the mailbox. The ruts in my lawn eventually faded. But the caution I carried every time I pulled into my own driveway took longer to disappear. Still, something good came out of it. The neighborhood came together, created a real community watch, not a Karen-style operation fueled by paranoia, but a network of neighbors who actually supported each other. We shared updates, helped mow lawns for the elderly, babysat, looked out for each other's pets. The street felt safer, kinder. And as for me, I kept every record, every video, every fake letter, because you never know when someone like Karen might show up again, and this time, I'll be ready before the first cone hits my driveway. Even though Karen had finally left the neighborhood, packing up her self-righteous chaos and luxury drama in the back of a moving van, influence still lingered like a bad smell you couldn't quite place. It wasn't just about the space she took up on the street, or the way she used her BMW like a battering ram for her entitlement. It was about the fear and exhaustion she left behind in people who had spent months walking on eggshells. For weeks after her departure, I kept expecting another letter, another false report, another carefully worded threat disguised as a concerned citizen's note. I double-checked every package left on my porch. I looked twice when someone slowed down near my driveway. It's hard to unwind when someone has turned your home into a battlefield. But slowly, the neighborhood began to breathe again. People were walking their dogs without fear of being filmed. Kids were playing basketball in the street without being yelled at for public disturbance. The woman who lived 2 doors down told me it was the first time in 6 months she didn't feel the need to act invisible when taking out her trash. It was peaceful, but that peace wouldn't last, because Karen, even in exile, wasn't done. 2 weeks after she left, I received a certified letter at my door. It was from her attorney, or more accurately, someone claiming to be her attorney. The letter accused me of orchestrating a malicious neighborhood campaign to destroy Ms. Karen's mental health, damage her property value, and compromise her personal safety. It threatened to sue me for slander, libel, and civil conspiracy. It even claimed that the stress I caused had contributed to her mental collapse and inability to find work, even though Karen had never worked a day in the time I'd known her. I took the letter straight to my attorney, who reviewed it and immediately burst into laughter. "This isn't from a real law firm," he said. "This is a Word document with a fancy footer. Look, there's no legal license, no case number, no return address except a P.O. box in another state. This isn't a lawsuit. It's a bluff. Still, he recommended we respond formally, if only to set a record. He sent a cease and desist letter and demanded Karen cease any further communication. But the situation had already stirred something in Miana's that this wasn't quite over yet. And I was right, one of the neighbors. Becca, who lived directly across from Karen's old house, noticed something strange. For several nights in a row, a silver rental car had been parking along the street near the corner, with a figure sitting inside for hours. It never left notes, never got out, just sat there with the engine running. On the fourth night, I approached. The figure inside. A man in his 40s. Sunglasses on despite the time of day, rolled down the window just enough to say, "I'm just doing surveillance, private security, don't worry about it." Then he rolled the window back up. I wasn't buying it. I reported the vehicle to local authorities, who ran the plate. The car was rented under a company in Karen's name. She had apparently started years ago as an LLC for her consulting services. It wasn't illegal, but it confirmed she was still watching, still trying to gather anything to use against me. I began to suspect she was planning a larger lawsuit after all, or maybe another public stunt to regain attention. The police couldn't do much after all. Sitting in a car on a public street wasn't a crime. But it pushed me to upgrade my cameras again, this time with license plate recognition and live alerts sent directly to my phone. I also began keeping detailed logs, not just of Karen's past behavior, but of anything suspicious going forward. I wasn't paranoid, I was prepared. Then, one morning, I woke to find the remnants of what looked like ashes on my front lawn. Small, smoldering pile of burnt paper, twigs, and what might have been a manila envelope. I didn't touch it. I called the sheriff immediately, and they bagged it for evidence. Later testing revealed it was a partially burned stack of documents with one readable page that included my name, address, and notes about community manipulation, social engineering, and a mention of public humiliation lawsuit prep. The handwriting matched earlier notes we'd collected from Karen's fake HOA citations. It was her again. It didn't take long before the sheriff's department issued another warning to her new address, this time through official channels, that any further harassment, even indirect, could be considered criminal stalking. After that, the car never returned. But Karen, true to her delusional flair, had one last act to play. Just before the holidays, a story ran in a fringe online blog titled, "The HOA Hostage, One Woman's Fight Against Neighborhood Tyranny." The author, anonymous. The subject, fictionalized, heavily twisted version of our sagaware, was the villain. In her version, I was a paranoid, weaponized man-child with control issues who used community influence and technological surveillance to dismantle the dignity of a single mother. I laughed at first, then scrolled down and saw that it included pictures of me on my own lawn, cropped to make me look angry, confused, or dangerous. She had used surveillance photos she took during her time across the street, reported the article. Others did too. Eventually, the site removed it under pressure from multiple takedown requests. But that wasn't the end result Karen had hoped for. The article backfired. More neighbors rallied in support, and a few even submitted testimonials to the sheriff's office stating they were afraid Karen might return. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the collective damage she had inflicted. One retired couple down the street confided that Karen had once accused them of spying on her house, using bird feeders. Another neighbor admitted they moved out early after Karen followed their teenage son home one day, accusing him of tagging street signs. Now that she was gone, everyone wanted to make sure she never came back. The HOA revised their membership agreement to include a new clause allowing for long-term behavioral review, meaning if someone returned after expulsion, their actions would be monitored closely. And I made sure the neighborhood records stayed intact, archived, backed up, ready to use again if needed. By now, my lawyer had sent one final letter to Karen's last known address, warning of legal action if she continued her smear campaign, or any form of surveillance. And while she didn't respond, the silence this time felt defeated. As I stood one night in the driveway she had blocked so many times with her BMW, I thought about everything it had taken to reclaim my own home. The time, the stress, the endless documentation. But I also saw the change around me. The street that once felt cold and divided was now filled with quiet strength. People waved. They said good morning. Some even dropped off cookies and thank you notes, not because I had won a war, but because I refused to lose one. Gosh. Karen had used every dirty tactic she could think of. Intimidation, manipulation, slander, false reports, and even ghost-written blog posts. But in the end, the one thing she couldn't manipulate was the truth. And that was what saved me and the neighborhood she tried to control. Winter passed without incident, and by spring Karen was nothing more than a cautionary tale in the neighborhood, a name whispered in passing with the kind of hushed amusement reserved for urban legends and small-town infamy. Been repainted by the new owners, her name scrubbed from HOA logs, and the silver BMW was never seen again. For a while, I avoided driving past her new address just to keep my own peace. But I eventually learned she had moved again, out of state, maybe chasing a fresh start, or just trying to outrun her own reputation. Still, I remained watchful. You don't go through months of targeted harassment, false accusations, fake lawsuits, and psychological games without coming out changed. I left the security cameras up, kept backups of every letter, every clip, every screenshot, and not because I was afraid anymore, but because I'd learned that some people don't care how much you've done right, they just hate that you're in their way. One afternoon, while I was working in my garage, a couple strolled by and stopped at the end of the driveway. They were new to the area, recently moved into a house 3 blocks down. The husband looked at my lawn and said, "So you're the guy who took down BMW Karen?" I raised an eyebrow, then chuckled. That's one way to put it. He told me they'd heard the stories, read some of the old neighborhood posts, and wanted to say thanks not just for standing up to her, but for showing others they didn't have to tolerate that kind of behavior either. That small moment struck me because I hadn't set out to be anyone's example. I just wanted to pull into my driveway without being harassed. But when people saw one person draw a line, it gave them permission to draw their own. Karen had made the mistake of believing her car, her voice, and her threats were louder than everyone else's combined. And for a time, they weren't till enough of us said no. But there was one more twist left in the story, something I didn't expect, and it came nearly a year after Karen had disappeared. A court clerk contacted me by mail. Apparently, Karen had filed a final civil suit months prior before her DUI arrest. But it had been tied up in administrative delays and was only just now scheduled for dismissal. Attached to the notice was an affidavit she had submitted with her claim. Most of it was the same delusional rambling I had seen before, claims that I manipulated the HOA, that I used military-grade surveillance equipment to gaslight a peaceful resident, and that I had incited a community-wide hate campaign. But at the end, scribbled in the margin in pen, was a note she had clearly added herself. I should have parked somewhere else. I laughed for a solid minute. That sentence, those 5 words, were the closest thing I'd ever get to a confession. No apology, no accountability, just a bitter acknowledgement that blocking my driveway with her BMW might have been the first domino that sent everything toppling. That moment made me reflect on how small it all began. One bad decision, one petty act, one refusal to move, and from there, a wildfire of entitlement, lies, and destruction. Karen's downfall wasn't caused by anyone sabotaging her, it was entirely her own doing. All I did was shine a light on the darkness she created. As summer returned, I finally finished the garden I had abandoned during the worst months of the drama. I planted low-maintenance flowers, laid brick edging along the walkway, and repainted the front porch railings. The house, my house, looked brighter, lighter. Visitors didn't ask about Karen anymore. They asked about the new fence, the solar lights, the birdhouse I'd built with my nephew. Life was moving forward, the way it should have all along. One evening, as I sat outside watching the sun dip behind the trees, a thought settled in. Sometimes standing up for yourself doesn't mean raising your voice. Sometimes it means keeping your cool while someone else loses theirs. Documenting everything, staying grounded and letting their actions speak louder than your retaliation. I never once yelled back. I never stooped to Karen's level, and that's what undid her. So if you ever find yourself facing someone like her, someone who blocks your driveway, your peace, your sanity with a BMW and a bloated sense of superiority, remember this: you don't have to fight fire with fire. You just have to shine. Enough light to expose where the smoke is coming from. And the louder they scream, the more they reveal themselves. Karen wanted to control the narrative. Instead, she became the cautionary tale. And I just wanted to go home. If you've ever dealt with a neighbor from hell, or faced someone who thought they were untouchable behind a steering wheel, make sure you subscribe to Sham Stories, because we tell the truth no matter how loud the BMW engine gets on. Trust me, there's always another Karen waiting to be exposed. Stay alert, stay grounded, and remember, you don't have to move for anyone who doesn't respect your driveway.